Now, the default replication in ActiveGeo replication is asynchronous. However, if the application needs to have synchronous replication, then you can do so by calling the SP wait for database copy sync immediately after committing a transaction. This will block the calling thread until all committed transactions have been replicated to the secondary. The procedure can add significant delay to the calling thread if the size of the transaction log is being replicated. So it's advised to use this procedure to prevent critical data loss and not use it for everything. Auto failover groups allow you to automatically recover one or more groups of databases in case of a region failure. All databases in an auto failover group should belong to a single server, and they will fail over to a single server as well. So we've got our failover group there. So a failover group is a group of databases between the primary server and the secondary server which are to be recovered as a unit if there's an outage in the primary region. The primary server is the one that hosts the primary database. Application can read and write on the primary database. The secondary server is the one that's got the secondary databases, and an application can only read from the secondary databases. The data is asynchronously replicated from the primary to the secondary, and the primary and secondary servers can't be in the same region. When it comes to adding a database to the failover group, when a database within a server or elastic pool is added to the failover group, a secondary database with a performance level similar to that of the primary database is automatically created on the secondary server. If the primary database is in an elastic pool, then the elastic pool with the same name is automatically created on the secondary server. And when we're adding a secondary database which already exists in the secondary database server, but it's not part of the failover group, a new secondary database is created in the secondary server. Okay, the read-write listener. This is a DNS CNAME record that points to the primary server URL. It allows the application to transparently connect to the available primary server in case of a failover. So this is very similar to an availability group listener with an on-premises availability group configuration. The application didn't connect to the primary or the secondary server URL. Instead, it connected to the listener. Now, in case of a failover, the listener automatically points to the new primary server. So, therefore, unlike manual failover, the users don't have to change any connection strings in their application to redirect their application. Then we have a read-only listener. Now, this is a DNS CNAME record that points to the secondary server, and it allows the application to transparently connect to the secondary for read-only queries. So if you want to offload the workload to the secondary server automatically, you can do so by adding the application equals read-only switch to the application connection string. Now, however, the read workload should be tolerant to certain staleness of data. And this is because of the fact the replication is asynchronous and the secondary database will be behind the primary, even if it's only by a few seconds. Failover policy. The default failover policy is set to automatic. However, it can be turned off if the failover process is controlled by the application. The manual failover is required if automatic failover is turned off and the failover process isn't controlled by the application. The manual failover can also be initiated anytime if required, and this is independent of the automatic failover policy. So an example of a manual failover is switching back to the primary region once the region has recovered from the outage and is available to host resources again. Grace period with data loss hours. This setting controls the duration the system fails for before initiating the automatic failover. So for example, if the grace period with data loss hours is set to 2 hours, then in case of an outage in the primary region, the failover will take place after 2 hours. However, if the outage is resolved before the grace period expires, then no failover occurs. Friendly failover. With friendly failover, if there's an outage in the primary region which has not yet impacted the database, but potentially may impact it in the near future, and the database is still online, a friendly failover with full synchronization is immediately initiated, bypassing the grace period with the data loss hours value. There is no data loss in a friendly failover. The grace period setting is only effective when friendly failover isn't possible. Upgrading the primary database service tier. The service tier and performance level of the primary database can be modified when required. The performance level within the same service tier can be modified without disconnecting the secondary database. In other words, you can upgrade the primary database from standard to standard S1 without disconnecting the corresponding secondary database connection. However, if you are switching between service tiers, it's recommended and enforced to first upgrade the secondary database and then the primary database to avoid the termination of the secondary database connection. If the secondary database is part of an auto failover group, then it's advised not to downgrade the secondary database service tier, and this is to avoid performance degradation in case of a failover.